In this video, I'll demonstrate assembling an unbuilt Heathkit HD-1982 Micoder kit from around 1976. The Heathkit HD-1982 was a microphone designed for use with amateur radio transceivers such as the Heathkit HW-202, HW-2036, 2036A, or HW-2021. It would also work with virtually any other 2-meter FM mobile or handheld radio having a high impedance microphone input, microphone level audio input, and a standard press-to-talk microphone connection. The name referred to the fact that, as well as a microphone and press-to-talk button, it included a DTMF tone encoder, which was typically used to control equipment remotely, such as accessing a repeater or making a phone call through a repeater auto patch. A telephone-style keypad with 12 buttons was provided on the back of the microphone. It was sold on its own or as an upgrade when buying a Heathkit transceiver. The retail price was typically US $49.95, and it was offered from 1976 to 1977. It was followed by the HD-1984 Micoder 2, which was sold from 1977 to 1983. The Micoder 2 was identical in appearance and features to the Micoder, but used a simpler circuit based on a single-chip touch-tone encoder IC. The HD-1984 also didn't require any alignment, whereas the HD-1982 required a frequency counter to align it. It uses two 555 timer chips to generate each of the two tones that are sent. An LM301 op-amp drives the audio output. The transistor is used to control an LED which illuminates when a tone is being sent. The microphone is an electric condenser type. A press-to-talk switch controls transmit versus receive. The keypad, which I don't have, was a panel of 12 switches, each of which made two connections in order to select which combinations of two tones would be sent, from a group of 4 low tones and 3 high tones. These DTMF tones are the same as used by telephones. The keypad would have looked similar to the one on this unit, which is a standalone tone generator. It was powered by a 9-volt battery, and most circuitry is on a single double-sided printed circuit board. This kit was given to me by a member of a local vintage radio club. It consisted of just the printed circuit board and a bag of parts. Missing was the case, microphone element, press-to-talk switch, and wires. The microphone would have looked similar to this unit from my Yaesu radio transceiver. It came in this paper bag, which I believe was part of the original packaging. It would have come in a box with at least one other bag of parts for the microphone and a manual. I found a full copy of the manual for the HD-1982 on the internet, which I printed out. I decided to build the encoder and make a YouTube video of the process. The first step is to refer to the manual and organize the parts, seeing if there are any missing, and if so, see if I have replacements I can use. Some non-component parts were in the bag. A Heathkit model and series number sticker, a Micoder decorative plate sticker, which is used if the microphone hanger is not installed, a Micoder 2 decorative plate sticker, more on this later, a small piece of metal which the manual lists as 1-inch steel blade, a microphone clip, a 1-inch by 1-inch battery cushion, and some small pin sockets. Other than the pin sockets, none of these parts will be needed as I don't have the original microphone case. Looking at the electronic parts, most were present with a few exceptions. There are some 1% tolerance resistors. These are hard to find unusual values. Fortunately, they were all present. The 3 potentiometers are present. Other resistors are 10% tolerance. 2 are missing, but were common values that I had on hand. 1 ceramic capacitor was missing, but is a common value that I have. A 0.22 microfarad tantalum capacitor was missing, but I have a large paper capacitor of that value that should work. The 3 ICs, transistor, and LED were present. I noticed that the ICs have the Heathkit part numbers printed on them rather than the manufacturer's part number. It was missing the 9-volt battery clip, but I have some on hand. So let's start construction, following the steps in the manual. I'll edit out some pauses and speed up some of the steps. The PCB is double-sided and components go on both sides of the board. It's important to read the manual carefully to avoid assembling it incorrectly. We start with installing the 8-pin sockets, which will later go to the keypad switches. They get pressed in and then soldered. I'm checking off the steps in the manual as I complete them. Next, 9 resistors get installed. On the next page in the instructions, there's some capacitors and some more resistors to install. Some components need to have the leads formed or bent, as per the manual. One of the missing capacitors was a 0.22 microfarad tantalum. I have a paper capacitor of that value, but it's very large. I think instead I'm going to use the smallest value of tantalum that I have, a 1 microfarad, which I think will work just as well in this application. Next, the 3 8-pin ICs are installed. I chose to use IC sockets, but the manual didn't originally call for this, and possibly there may not have been sufficient room in the case if sockets were used. Then the LED is installed. At this point, the manual repeats the early instructions to install the 8-pin sockets. In my copy of the manual, someone has crossed this step out. It may have been corrected in a manual erratum. Next, some parts are installed on the other side of the board, some capacitors and the transistor. The final steps are to install some wires which will go to circuitry not on the PCB, such as the switch, microphone, and battery. The 3 controls are then installed. At this point, the manual suggests to inspect the board for any soldering issues and for correct orientation of the components that are polarized. Any protruding leads should be cut. I also realize I don't need the 2 additional missing resistors because they're installed inside the microphone, which I don't have. I installed the 3 integrated circuits into the sockets. Once the PCB is assembled, we move on to some initial tests before final assembly. Some resistance tests are done to ensure the power connections are not open or shorted. The resistance from the black to red leads should be infinite. That looks good. And the resistance from the black to orange leads should be 4 to 6 kiloohms. I'm seeing 6.8 kiloohms, a little on the high side, but that's probably fine as the measurements will vary a little bit depending on the meter used. The manual says the meter readings were made with a Heathkit model IM18 VTVM. Next in assembly would be mounting the keypad and wiring up the microphone, press-to-talk switch, and so on. As I don't have any of these components, at this point I'll just wire in the 9-volt battery clip. I'll also only do a subset of the wiring. I'll hook up the wires to get the tone output. I'm now ready for the adjustments. The manual lists 2 methods. Method 1 requires a frequency counter to adjust the tone frequencies. This is the preferred method. Method 2 requires access to a ham radio repeater where a tone decoder is available. I have a frequency counter, so I'll use method number 1. For testing, I hook the unit up to an oscilloscope, which also has a frequency counter function. I'll also use a real frequency counter to make more accurate measurements. To simulate the keypad, I'll run a jumper wire and connect the appropriate wires to send a tone as per the table on the schematic. The first step is to temporarily solder a 10K resistor to test pad FL, which will go to the scope and counter. We send the tones associated with the number key and adjust trimmer R109 so that it reads within 2 Hz of 941 Hz. This is one of the low tone pairs. You might recall the parts included something referred to as a 1-inch steel blade. Heathkit provided this to adjust the trimmer pots. The metal blade is inserted into the provided plastic nut starter and used as a small screwdriver to turn the trimmers. The original nut starter has been lost, but would have looked like this one. So we now see the tone on the oscilloscope and the frequency on the counter. We can adjust trimmer R109 so that it reads 941 Hz, plus or minus 2 Hz. Now we verify that the other low tones are correct. I move the jumper to the appropriate setting for tone 9, and it should read 852 Hz plus or minus 13 Hz. And it's reading 854, 855. Tone 6 should be 770 Hz plus or minus 11 Hz, and looks good at about 772. And the final low tone is 3, which should read 697 Hz plus or minus 11 Hz. And it's looking good at 700, 701 Hz. Now we move the resistor to pad FH and adjust the high tones. We connect the jumper to send the number key tone and adjust trimmer R112 for an output of 1477 Hz plus or minus 2 Hz. We then verify that the other high tones are correct. 0 should be 1336 Hz plus or minus 20 Hz, and that looks good at 1341. And star should be 1209 Hz plus or minus 18 Hz, and it looks within spec at 1214. So these all look good, and we can now remove the resistor. I can also hook the output up to these amplified speakers so we can hear the tone pairs. It sounds like what you would hear when dialing a touch-tone telephone. The final adjustment is to adjust another pot for the output level to ensure it's correct for the radio transceiver. We can omit this step as we aren't building the full microphone unit. We can see on the oscilloscope that the level can be adjusted. While some of the key parts were missing, it was fun to assemble this tone encoder board and get it working. If it was purchased in 1976, it's now 50 years later that it was finally built. This particular unit was only in the market for 2 years before it was replaced by the Micoder 2. At the time, a tone encoder was a nice option to add to a radio. Today, almost all VHF and UHF radios have this function built in. Where this kit came from is something of a mystery. One possibility is that someone had purchased an HD-1982 Micoder, and before they built it, the Micoder 2 came out. Heathkit offered an upgrade kit, which just included the Micoder 2 encoder board. Perhaps the owner bought this and built the Micoder 2, discarding the original Unbuilt encoder board. The fact that the parts included a Micoder 2 label adds credibility to this theory.